I stood in my kitchen at 8 o'clock at night, staring at my phone like it might shatter in my hand. The pot roast I had spent 4 hours preparing was hardening in the warming drawer. My grandmother's good china, the plates I only took out maybe twice a year, was set for 4, each napkin folded carefully, precisely, the way my late husband Arthur had taught me. The food was getting cold. The house was getting quieter. And my son had just told me I didn't count as family. Let me go back. 3 years earlier, my son Marcus had called me on a Tuesday afternoon. His voice had that particular quality it takes on when he's about to ask for something not quite apologetic, but performatively gentle, as if gentleness alone could make the ask disappear into acceptability. He said his wife Nikki needed to leave her job. He said the kids needed a parent at home. He said the mortgage on their house in the uptown adjacent neighborhood was, well, it was breathing down their neck. Could I help? Just a little. Just for a while. Just until things stabilized. I was 62 years old, living in a modest house in the Montrose area of Houston on the pension Arthur had left me. That was the arrangement we'd made decades ago. He would build the career, and I would manage the household and our life together. When he passed 5 years earlier, that pension became my inheritance. Not lavish, but steady, reliable, enough for a quiet life. I didn't travel much. I didn't buy things I didn't need. I had my garden club. I had my volunteer work at the library on Thursdays. I had my routines and they sustained me. I told Marcus I could send something. Not everything, but something. He suggested $550 a week. That felt like a specific number, not a round number, which made it feel carefully calculated. I remember thinking that at the time but not questioning it. He was my son. Nikki was my daughter-in-law. The kids deserved stability. How could I say no? That Friday, $550 left my Houston bank account. It became the rhythm of my life. Every single Friday morning, without fail, that transfer would post, rain or shine, sickness or health. Even the weeks when I had to skip my garden club, because I was running low on my own funds those weeks, the $550 still went out. $5,500 a year. $33,000 over 3 years. I was 52 years old when Arthur died, and I had been careful, so careful, with what he left me. I had rationed that money like it might have to last forever. And it could have. It would have. Until Friday. Every Friday. It didn't. I told myself the story everyone tells themselves in situations like this. It was temporary. It was necessary. It was what family does. Nikki's presence at home was important. The kids, Tyler and Emma, 7 and 5, needed stability. The market would turn. The housing market would loosen. Marcus would get a promotion. Something would change and they would become stable, and my son would call me one day and say, "Mom, we don't need your help anymore. Thank you for getting us through this." That phone call never came. What did come, year after year, was the sound of the weekly transfer posting. I noticed things, though. Small things at first. During a video call with the kids, I could see behind Nikki in their living room a new television, one of those enormous ones that now seemed to be standard. A painting on the wall that looked expensive, new furniture. Their neighborhood itself had upgraded. I had looked it up on Google Maps. The street view showed what had been a modest suburb transforming into something aspirational. I mentioned it to a friend, Patricia, who I'd known since we moved to Houston 30 years ago. I said, carefully, that Marcus seemed to be doing well. Patricia looked at me the way you look at someone wearing a price tag they don't see. She didn't say anything for a long moment, but I kept sending the money. I remember being at the library one Thursday, organizing donations in the back room, when one of the other volunteers mentioned her daughter-in-law had just joined a country club out in the outer suburbs. $35,000 initiation fee, she said, shaking her head. Who has that kind of money? I felt something cold move through my chest. I never mentioned that Marcus and Nikki had mentioned, in passing, that the kids might want to join the club their friends were joining. I never sent that particular detail out into the universe by saying it aloud. Then came my 65th birthday. I decided I wasn't going to ask for much. At my age, what I wanted was simple. I wanted my son and his wife and my grandchildren in my house. I wanted them around my table. I wanted to make Marcus's favorite meal, a pot roast with root vegetables, and this particular vanilla cake recipe that my mother had taught me when I was 22 and just married. I called a month in advance. I wanted to give them time to plan, to shift their schedules, to make it a priority. Marcus said yes immediately. Of course, Mom, we wouldn't miss it. I spent 6 weeks mentally preparing that dinner. I went to the farmer's market twice to find the exact right cut of beef. I practiced the cake recipe 2 weeks before the actual day, just to make sure the real vanilla, not the extract, was balanced correctly. I woke up at 4 in the morning on my birthday and started the preparations. The pot roast went into the oven by 5. The vegetables were prepped and roasting by 6. The cake came out of the oven at 6:30, cooling on the rack, the vanilla scent filling my entire kitchen. I showered at 7. I put on the blue dress my sister had given me for Christmas, the one I'd been saving. I set the table at 7:15 with those good plates. Crystal glasses, napkins, candles in the center. I was not a woman who needed dramatic celebration. I was a woman who needed her family to show up. By 6:30, the roast was done. Beautiful. The vegetables were caramelized and soft. The cake was frosted and ready. By 7 o'clock, I was standing in my kitchen, and the food was at its peak. By 7:30, I turned the oven to the lowest setting and put the pot roast inside the warming drawer. The house smelled like family, like home. At 8 o'clock, I sat at my table for a moment. Just sat in one of the 4 chairs, waiting. Then I picked up my phone. I tried calling Marcus first. No answer. I tried his wife Nikki. No answer. I called the house number. This time, Marcus picked up, but his voice was distant, distracted. In the background, I could hear a television. I could hear Nikki laughing about something, a real laugh, present and engaged. Marcus, I said carefully, are you on your way? The food is getting cold. He exhaled. It was the kind of exhale that told me, before he even spoke, that something was wrong. It was the sound of someone releasing frustration, the sound of someone who had to deliver bad news and didn't want to take the time. Look, Mom, we're not coming. The kitchen was silent, except for the low hum of the oven. Nikki made other plans for us. Something came up. You know how it is. I did know how it was. I knew exactly. I had known for 3 years, I think, but I had been choosing not to know. I had been choosing the version of my son and his wife that I wanted to exist rather than the version that actually did. It's my birthday, Marcus. We scheduled this a month ago. You said you wouldn't miss it. He made a noise, something between a sigh and a groan. Things change, Mom. Look, we're busy right now. And Nikki says. She says we really need to do something for ourselves tonight. We just can't. My hand was shaking. Not from anger. From the sudden, awful clarity of understanding something I had been refusing to see for years. Nikki says? I asked quietly. Honestly, Mom, Nikki says we don't count you as family anyway. You're always criticizing us, always asking for updates on the kids, always checking in. It's just a lot. And we're tired of it. We'll call you next week. And then he hung up. I stood in my kitchen. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw anything or sit down heavily or do any of the dramatic things that grief is supposed to look like. Instead, something happened that was much colder and much more dangerous. A strange, crystalline silence filled my mind. It was like the moment right before a migraine, that eerie absence of feeling that precedes the pain. Except the pain didn't come. What came instead was clarity. 3 years. $33,000. A woman whose voice I could hear in the background of my son's life, telling him that I didn't count, that I was a burden, that my wanting to know my grandchildren, my wanting them to visit me on my birthday, was criticism, was nagging, was something to be endured and then discarded. I looked at the table I had set for 4. I looked at the pot roast that was now sitting in a warming drawer, slowly surrendering its moisture and flavor. I looked at the cake that I had made from scratch, with butter and eggs and real vanilla. And I understood something that changed everything. I had not been supporting my son. I had been purchasing a relationship with people who did not value me. I had been paying a subscription fee to be dismissed. And the subscription was about to be cancelled. I spent the next hour methodically packing that food into glass containers. I sealed the lids. I placed the containers in the refrigerator. I cleaned every surface of the kitchen. I moved through these actions with the kind of calm that only comes when you have already made a decision and you are simply executing it. Then I walked to my office, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. The recurring weekly transfer of $550 was scheduled to process the next morning. I hovered my mouse over the cancel button. I clicked. The transfer vanished from my schedule. But I did not feel complete. I opened another tab and logged into my cell phone provider's account. 2 years ago, Marcus had mentioned casually that his phone bills were expensive. Nikki's phone bill was expensive. Could I help? I had added both of their lines to my unlimited plan without question. 4 lines now. Mine, Marcus's, Nikki's, and one they had given to Tyler for emergencies. I opened the list of lines and clicked to suspend service on both of theirs. Then I went to my streaming accounts. Netflix, Hulu, HBO. All shared through my login. All things Marcus and Nikki had watched on my dime. I changed every password. I signed out of all devices. I logged out. I deleted saved accounts. I did this with the precision of someone performing surgery. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. No honey, no sweetener, just the tea. I sat on my couch in my living room and I waited. Exactly 42 minutes later, my home phone, the one I kept mostly for emergencies, the one I rarely gave anyone except my son, began to ring. I watched the caller ID flash Marcus's name. I did not answer. It rang again. And again. The answering machine picked up and I heard his voice through the small speaker, no longer controlled, no longer casual. Mom, pick up. My phone just went out. Nikki's phone went out. She got an alert from the bank that the transfer didn't go through. What is going on? Fix this. Fix this right now. He sounded terrified. He sounded furious. But he did not sound apologetic. There was not one word of concern about whether I was okay, whether my birthday had been lonely, whether I had eaten any of the dinner I had made. There was not one moment of recognition that Steve Dunn might have been unkind. What he sounded was panicked that his resources had dried up. That was all. I picked up the remote and turned off the answering machine volume. I took a long sip of my tea. I looked at my grandfather clock, the one Arthur had restored himself before he died, and I thought about how it was 11 o'clock on my 65th birthday, and I was going to sleep peacefully for the first time in years. I did not know, at that moment, what would happen next. I did not have a master plan, but I knew something fundamental had shifted. I had finally allowed myself to see my son and his wife clearly. And what I saw was not people worthy of my sacrifice. They were simply people, ordinary people, capable of casual cruelty, willing to manipulate me for money, comfortable using me as an ATM while telling me I didn't matter to them. And I was done with that. I went to bed at 11:15. I slept 11 hours. The doorbell rang at 8:15 the next morning. I was already awake, dressed, standing at my kitchen island with a cup of coffee that I had made exactly the way I liked it. Medium roast, 1 cream, no sugar. I had already been to my garden, deadheading the roses that had finished blooming. I had already called Patricia and asked if she wanted to come for lunch. I was already living a different life. I opened the door and found Marcus and Nikki standing on my porch. Nikki was wearing a brand new designer coat I recognized from a magazine I'd seen at my doctor's office. Burberry. Camel-colored. Probably around $2,000. Her leather purse was definitely designer. I recognized the logo. Her nails were freshly manicured. Probably done yesterday. Probably while she was telling my son that I didn't count as family. Marcus looked exactly like he had looked in that moment when he was 5 years old, and I had caught him taking money from my purse. Panicked, caught, desperate. "Mom," he said, pushing past me into the hallway without being invited. "What is happening? Did we get hacked? My phone won't turn on. It says my service is suspended." "And Nikki's phone," and the bank said. I closed the door quietly behind them. "I canceled them," I said, walking back to my coffee. Nikki's head snapped up like I had slapped her. "You what?" "The phone service. The cell lines. I canceled them. And the bank transfer." I took a sip of my coffee. It was still warm. It tasted perfect. "And I'm canceling the streaming service access. You're no longer authorized users." Nikki laughed. It was the kind of laugh that's made entirely of rage. Are you seriously cutting us off? Just like that? No warning? We have children. We depend on that money. This is incredibly selfish, Nikki Monica. This is incredibly selfish. She actually said her own name instead of mine for a moment. I noticed that. I set my coffee down carefully. I am no longer funding your lifestyle, I said quietly, looking directly at her. For 3 years, I have been sending you $2,800 a month. I have been paying for your phones. I have been paying for your entertainment. I have been doing this while you told my son that I didn't count, that I was nagging, that I was a burden. I paused. I am restructuring my finances for my retirement. That restructuring started at 8 o'clock last night. You are adults. You will figure it out. Nikki's face went very still, then very red. You can't just do this. You can't just cut us off with no notice. We have kids. We have bills. You know we depend on that money. That's interesting, I said, picking up my coffee again, because I also have kids. I also have bills. And yet, I was managing to support myself, support you, and work around the reality that you despised me. So I am relatively confident you will manage now. Marcus was pacing. His hands were shaking. Mom, this is insane. I need the phone for work. My company calls me. They call me on that line. I need it. He was speaking faster, getting more desperate. And if Nikki doesn't have her phone, how do I contact her if she's out? We have 2 kids in school. What if there's an emergency? I believe there was an invention called a landline, I said. Or perhaps you could upgrade to a plan you can actually afford with your own income. He pulled his keys out of his pocket. His hands were shaking. He looked at the key ring, heavy brass keys, the set I had given him when he turned 21. He had a key to my house on there, a spare, just in case. I looked at that key. It had been sitting on his ring for 14 years, representing a security I had offered him. A home within a home. A place he could come when things were difficult. I had given him that key, with the kind of love that makes you believe your child understands the gesture means. I trust you. I love you. You have always been safe with me. I stepped forward and reached out my hand. What are you doing? He said. Without answering, I slid the brass key off his keyring. I felt it settle into my palm solid, warm from his pocket. I'm taking back my property, I said. Nikki made a sound of pure outrage. You're taking his key? You're actually. She took a step toward me, and something in my posture must have changed, because she stopped. This is unbelievable. You're punishing us for what exactly? Having a life? Having standards? Standards. That word struck me with almost physical force. She had used the word standards. As if maintaining the illusion of wealth on my dime was a standard. As if lying to me about financial hardship while buying designer clothes was a standard. As if telling my son I didn't count as family was a standard worth maintaining. I walked to my front door and opened it. Both of you need to leave. You can't kick us out of your house, Nikki said. But her voice had changed. There was something less certain in it. She was beginning to understand that I absolutely could. And I would. And I was serious. I have a gardening club meeting at 10 o'clock, I said, as if she hadn't spoken. I need to shower and change. So yes, I can. And I am. Goodbye. Marcus made a move toward me like he might argue further, but I was already closing the door. I closed it firmly and locked it. I did not watch them leave. I did not wait to hear them drive away. I went upstairs, took a long shower with good soap, put on a fresh set of clothes, and was at my gardening club by 9:45. My friend Patricia took one look at me and said, "Something's different." I smiled and told her I had dropped 300 pounds of dead weight. The next 4 days passed in a strange silence. No calls from Marcus because his phone was disconnected. No messages from Nikki because she didn't have my cell number, only the landline, which I had let go to voicemail. I spent Thursday with my garden. I spent Friday reading. I spent Saturday at the farmer's market, buying fresh vegetables and flowers for my table, not for anyone else's consumption, but for my own pleasure. By Sunday evening, I was beginning to believe that perhaps I had handled this completely wrong. Perhaps I should turn the phones back on. Perhaps I should send them money for a car payment or an emergency. Perhaps I was being cruel. Then, on Tuesday afternoon, I checked my email. Marcus had sent a message from his office computer. The subject line was simple. Please. I read it twice, then 3 times. Timmy and Lily keep asking when they can come see Grandma. They keep asking why Grandma hasn't called. Tyler and Emma were missing you. But he had written their names as Timmy and Lily, a sign that he was either in a panic state and had gotten the names wrong, or the message had been composed by someone else who didn't actually know the children. I suspected the latter. The message continued. Also, Nikki's car transmission is slipping. We need about $300 to fix it so she can take the kids to school. Please, Mom. Please just send $300. Please. He had written please 4 times. I read this message with an emotion I can only describe as cold recognition. My son was trying to weaponize my grandchildren. He was trying to make me believe that the children themselves were demanding my presence when, really, they were asking because they had been told to miss me. Nikki had left the household and gone to work at some job she had mentioned needing a part-time position earlier in the week. I learned later, and now they needed money for a car transmission. A year ago, reading about a needed car repair would have sent me to my checkbook immediately. A year ago, the mention of my grandchildren missing me would have had me in tears, already dialing his number. But a year ago, I was still buying my way into their lives. A year ago, I was still operating under the delusion that money could purchase love from people incapable of feeling it. I replied to his email with one sentence. I'm sorry to hear about the car. The city bus schedule is available online. 10 minutes later, I received a text from an unknown number. It had to be Nikki, using a prepaid phone from the grocery store. You are a monster. You are destroying your grandchildren. Don't expect us to beg anymore. I did not reply. I blocked the number. I know what I need to tell you now, because I can feel some of you beginning to think I was wrong. Some of you believe that a grandmother should always have access to her grandchildren. That blood matters. That I should have given them the money for the transmission. That my hurt feelings were less important than my grandchildren's well-being. Let me ask you something. Do you think children are better served by a grandmother who teaches them that love is conditional on financial support? Do you think they are learning healthy relationship patterns by watching their mother manipulate their grief to extract money? I had to make a choice between short-term connection and long-term integrity. I had to believe that my grandchildren would eventually understand why I did this, and I had to accept that Nikki would weaponize them against me. I had to accept that for a while. They might suffer some inconvenience. But I also had to understand that if I gave in now, that manipulation would never end. It would only evolve. Next would come the emergency tuition payment. Then the down payment on a house. Then a vacation they needed for mental health reasons. The well would never dry. My wallet would become a permanent organ of their body, and removing it would require an amputation that grew more traumatic with each passing year. So I did something that's much harder than giving money. I stood firm. On Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after I canceled their phones, a silver SUV pulled up to my driveway. I was in my living room, reading the newspaper, an actual physical newspaper that I had purchased at the grocery store, when I saw it through the window. Sarah got out of the driver's seat. No, that's not right. Nikki got out of the driver's seat. She was wearing different clothes than she had worn at my door, and she looked harried. Behind her, I could see 2 small figures in the back seats. Tyler and Emma, still in their school uniforms. She didn't ring the bell. She didn't knock. She simply opened the screen door, which I never lock during the day. A mistake I would soon correct, pushed the children inside onto the welcome mat, and yelled, I have a doctor's appointment. Watch them. I'll be back at 4. Before I could even stand up from my chair, I heard her car pulling back down the driveway. I sat in my living room for a moment, processing what had just happened. Nikki had literally abandoned my grandchildren on my porch. Not asked me to watch them. Not requested a time. Simply left them, as if I were a daycare facility. As if I had not just canceled every financial entanglement she had with me. As if she had not told my son that I did not count as family. I stood up and walked to the foyer, where Tyler and Emma were standing with their backpacks, looking confused and anxious. Well, I said, taking a breath, it looks like we're having an adventure today. Do you want to make pancakes? Their faces transformed. Children are resilient, forgiving creatures. They forgive quickly because they have not yet learned the toxicity of grudge holding. I made them pancakes. We built a blanket fort in my living room. I read them books. We played a game with cardboard boxes where they pretended to be archaeologists digging up buried treasure. It was a wonderful morning. For those few hours, I got to be simply their grandmother. Not a resource. Not a burden. Not a woman they were being manipulated into missing. But while I was making Tyler laugh by doing impressions of different animals, My mind was working. I understood what was happening. Nikki had determined that she could still use my house as free childcare. She had tested whether I would accept the children without being asked. She had decided that my boundaries were fake, that the cancellation of money was temporary, that I would fall in line because blood was thicker than water, and grandmothers don't say no. At 4 o'clock precisely, the silver SUV pulled back into my driveway. I heard the car door slam. I heard footsteps on the concrete. I heard Nikki's voice calling out, "Kids, let's go!" I stepped out onto my porch, closing the door carefully behind me so the children wouldn't hear what came next. Nikki was climbing the steps, her hair freshly blown out, a designer shopping bag over her shoulder. She had clearly spent her afternoon getting her hair done and shopping, not at a doctor's appointment. I held out a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she said, frowning as she unfolded it. "An invoice," I answered. She stared at the paper. I watched her eyes move across it as she read the numbers I had written out by hand that morning. Emergency childcare services. 7 hours at $25 per hour, plus $15 for lunch and snacks. Total, $190, due immediately. For a moment, Nikki looked at me like I was insane. Then she laughed. It was a real laugh, genuine amusement. "You're joking. You're actually billing me for babysitting your own grandchildren." "You dropped them off without warning or permission," I said quietly. "My time is no longer free. If you drop them off again, I will call Child Protective Services for abandonment. The next invoice will include a larger service charge." The laugh died in her throat. She stared at me, and I could see the precise moment when she realized I was not joking, that I was not going to relent, that this was not a phase, that her ability to weaponize guilt against me had ended permanently. She grabbed Tyler and Emma roughly, pulled them down the steps, and shoved them into the car. She did not say another word. She did not even look at me. She simply got in the car and drove away with a spray of gravel. That evening, I received a phone call on my landline from Marcus. He was using some other number, some colleague's phone. He was furious. "That's my mother," I heard Nikki screaming in the background. "That's your mother. She's billing you for watching your own grandchildren. She's completely insane." "Mom," Marcus shouted, his voice shaking. "What is wrong with you? Nikki says you're charging them for childcare. Do you understand how insane that sounds? We are 2 months behind on rent. We are 2 months behind. Sarah is stressed out of her mind. Are you trying to make us homeless?" "I gave you $2,800 a month for 3 years, Marcus," I said evenly. "That's $33,000. If you are behind on rent, it is not because of my lack of support. It is because of your choices. Both of your choices." He muttered something about grocery prices and cost of living, and then he hung up. I hung up the phone and realized I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt something much more interesting, curious. Where had all my money gone? The next day, I got in my car and drove across Houston to the suburb where Marcus and Nikki lived. It was a nicer neighborhood than it had been 3 years ago. More manicured, more obviously affluent. As I turned down their street, I began to slow my car to a crawl. There, in their wide driveway, sitting on a brand new trailer, was a luxury speedboat. It was gleaming. It still had the dealership stickers on the windshield. It was the kind of boat that costs $40,000, maybe $50,000. It was exactly the kind of boat that someone would purchase if they had an extra $2,800 a month coming in and no sense of consequence. I parked down the street and stared at it. That boat was my weekly $550. That boat was the money I hadn't spent on a vacation for myself in 10 years. That boat was the weeks I had skipped my garden club because I was running short. That boat was every time I had made a slightly cheaper meal so I could stretch my resources further. That boat was my grandchildren's mother telling me I didn't count as family. A cold, perfect clarity washed over me in that moment. Any remaining guilt I had been carrying evaporated. Any doubt I had about whether I was being too harsh, too punishing, too reactionary, all of it disappeared. They were not struggling. They were not making difficult choices between rent and groceries. They were not barely surviving. They were redirecting bills so they could play rich while telling me that I didn't matter. I put the car in drive and headed home. I did not need to confront them. Knowing was enough. It was more than enough. It reinforced every boundary I had just built. They had made their choices. They were going to have to figure out how to pay for them without my wallet funding the fantasy. A few days later, I needed to fix a loose hinge on my back gate. I walked to my garage, looking for a particular drill, a yellow power drill that my late husband Arthur had owned. Arthur had been a master carpenter. He had spent 30 years collecting tools, acquiring the exact implements that a craftsman needs. Before he died, he had given his entire collection to Marcus. It was thousands of dollars worth of equipment, professional grade, beautiful, well-maintained tools that had been gathered with intention over decades. I had kept only a small emergency kit for myself, but I knew Marcus had the drill I needed. I drove to his house on a day when I knew Nikki would be out. Marcus opened the door looking exhausted. He didn't invite me inside. When I asked to borrow the drill, he wouldn't look me in the eye. "I don't have it," he said quietly. "Did you lend it to a neighbor?" He swallowed hard. "No, I sold it." I said nothing. I waited. "I sold the tool chest," he continued, his voice getting smaller. "About a month ago. All of it. The whole collection." I stared at him. At my son. At the man who had inherited a legacy of craftsmanship and dedication from his father. "You sold your father's tools. The ones he spent 30 years collecting. The ones he specifically wanted you to have." "We needed the cash," Marcus said, defensive now, raising his voice. "Sarah wanted to join the country club. The initiation fee was huge. It was just metal and plastic, Mom. Don't make a big deal out of it." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't do any of the dramatic, visible things that devastation is supposed to look like. I simply nodded slowly. I took in the full measure of the man my son had become. He had traded his father's legacy not for survival, not for his children's food, but for country club privileges, for the appearance of wealth, for access to the same artificial lifestyle he was financing with my money. "I understand," I said quietly. I turned around and walked back to my car. I drove home. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made a decision. For years, I had held on to a small cabin by a lake, about 3 hours north of Houston. Arthur and I had bought it decades ago, paid it off long before he died. It was entirely in my name. I had been planning to leave it to Marcus. Nikki treated it like her personal summer home. She and Marcus spent the month of June there every year, treating the place like a resort they could access for free. Not anymore. The next morning, I packed an overnight bag, filled my trunk with heavy-duty garbage bags, and drove north. The cabin was a mess. Nikki had left it exactly as it had been abandoned at the end of last summer. Dust coated every surface. The pantry was full of stale, half-eaten cereal boxes. But more importantly, the closets were crammed full of their things. Nikki's expensive summer dresses, tags still attached on some of them. Marcus's fishing gear, inflatable pool toys, cases of wine they had shipped to the cabin for their summer entertaining. I got to work. I didn't damage anything, but I didn't fold anything either. I opened garbage bags and I started stuffing. Nikki's designer clothes, Marcus's tackle boxes, every single item they had left here. I filled bag after bag. 14 total. I dragged all 14 bags out onto the covered back porch, stacking them neatly so they would not blow away in the wind. Then I opened my phone and called a locksmith I found online. By 2:15 in the afternoon, he had replaced the deadbolts on the front door, the back door, and the shed. I tested the shiny new brass keys, putting them on my key ring alongside the key I had taken from Marcus's ring months earlier. Before I left, I called a real estate agent I had known for years. "I want to rent this place," I told her. "Short term. I want paying tenants who will respect the property." She came over within an hour. She took photos. We signed the rental agreement that same afternoon. A retired couple from Ohio wanted to rent the cabin for the entire summer season. The cash would easily cover my property taxes for the next 5 years. I locked the new deadbolt and drove home with something I hadn't felt in decades: peace. Memorial Day weekend arrived 2 weeks later. This was the traditional kickoff to what Nikki called lake season. I was sitting on my patio with Patricia, sharing a pitcher of lemonade, when my phone started vibrating. It was Marcus. I let it ring. He called back immediately. I answered. "Mom, what is wrong with the lock on the cabin? My key won't turn. And why are all our things in garbage bags on the porch?" He was panicking already, his voice rising. "Nikki invited 10 of her friends up here for a barbecue this weekend. They're all sitting in their cars in the driveway right now, waiting to get in. Did you change the locks?" "Yes," I said calmly, taking a sip of lemonade. "You don't live there, Marcus." "You can't. He was breathing hard. There has to be a spare key. You always keep a spare key hidden. There is no spare key for you, I said. The cabin is my property. Since you sold your father's tools for a country club membership, I decided to rent the cabin to a lovely retired couple from Ohio. They will be arriving tomorrow. I packed your belongings so you wouldn't leave a mess for my tenants. In the background, I heard Nikki screaming. She was actually screaming. She did what? Break a window. Marcus, break a window. We can break in. If you break a window, I added calmly, the neighbors will call the sheriff, and you will be arrested for breaking and entering. Load your trash bags into your cars and go home, Marcus. And don't call me again until you learn how to speak to me with respect. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Patricia raised her glass to me. We clinked them together in the afternoon sun. I had never felt more myself. 6 months have passed since that Memorial Day weekend. The fallout was exactly what I expected, but it doesn't touch me anymore. Without my weekly payments, Marcus and Nikki were forced to sell the speedboat at a massive loss just to cover their back rent. Nikki had to cancel her country club membership and actually get a part-time job at a medical billing office to help pay their bills. They couldn't maintain the lifestyle they had constructed. The illusion shattered. They had to face the reality of living within their actual means. This is the part of the story where some people expect redemption, where I tell you that Marcus came to his senses and apologized profusely, and we all learned valuable lessons about family and love. Where I tell you that Nikki broke down and admitted she had been terrible, and we now have a healthy relationship based on respect. That's not what happened. In September, Marcus showed up at my door. He had combed his hair. He was holding a bouquet of flowers from the grocery store's sale section. They were already wilting, which felt appropriate. He asked if he could come in. I opened the door, but I didn't step aside to let him pass. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded practiced, like he had said them to Nikki 100 times before saying them to me. I was wrong. I should have been there for your birthday. Nikki was wrong for what she said. Can we? Can we go back to how things were? I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was hoping I would say yes. He was hoping that this small gesture, these dying flowers, and these rehearsed words would be enough to restore the old dynamic. He wanted his mother back as ATM. He wanted the guilt to go away without changing anything fundamental. Things have gone back to normal, I told him. My normal is peaceful now. I sleep through the night. I have money in my bank account. I have boundaries. If you want to be in my life, Marcus, it will be as a mother and a grandmother. Not as a financial institution. Not as a woman you can dismiss and then access whenever you need something. I will never give you another dime. Do you understand? He nodded, but I could see the disappointment behind his eyes. The realization that this was not a temporary punishment. This was a permanent restructuring. I now see Tyler and Emma twice a month. I drive to a local park in my neighborhood. I buy them ice cream. We play for 2 hours. Nikki sits on a distant bench, scrolling through her phone, glaring at me occasionally. But she doesn't dare say a word. She knows I hold the keys to my own life now. She has zero power over me. Zero leverage. I don't harbor any deep rage toward them anymore. What I feel is something colder and more sustainable than rage. It's observation. It's distance. It's the clarity that comes from finally seeing people exactly as they are, rather than as you hope they will become. I use the rental income from the cabin to book a 2-week cruise for myself and Patricia next spring. We're going to the Caribbean. I'm going to sit on deck and read books and eat food I didn't prepare. I'm going to sleep deeply every night, and I'm going to wake up without anxiety. My house is quiet now. My bank account is full. The pot roast I made for my 65th birthday would have been delicious. I'm sure of it, but I have a feeling I'm going to make much better memories going forward. They told me I didn't count as family. In the end, they were right. I'm not their family anymore. I'm just a woman who finally woke up. A woman who closed her wallet and opened her eyes. A woman who discovered that the most radical act I could perform was simply standing up and walking away. Now, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with the question. How many people in your life are you funding? How many relationships are you maintaining through financial sacrifice? How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no, because you were afraid of disappointing someone or being seen as selfish? Looking back, the hardest part of this entire experience was not the cancellation of the money. It was not the confrontation or the locked cabin, or even the loss of access to my grandchildren for those long months. The hardest part was letting go of the illusion that if I just gave a little more, just a little more patience, just a little more money, just a little more understanding, they would finally respect me. That's the trap, isn't it? We believe that love is currency, that if we deposit enough affection, enough sacrifice, enough financial support, eventually we'll earn the respect and genuine connection we need. But the truth is far more brutal. You cannot buy genuine love. You shouldn't have to pay a subscription fee to be treated like family. Here's what I learned that I think you need to hear. Setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad mother. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't make you cruel. It makes you someone who knows their worth. It makes you someone who has decided that their peace is more important than other people's comfort. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And I decided I was done tolerating disrespect. I was done accepting dismissal. I was done funding a lifestyle while being told I didn't matter. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to make a quiet but incredibly difficult choice to protect your own peace, I want to hear about it. I want to hear what that moment felt like for you. Did you make the hard choice? Do you still wonder if you should have? Are you still stuck in the loop of giving and being dismissed? If you're watching this and you're currently in that loop, I want you to know something. The moment when you stop is not the moment you become cruel. It's the moment you become wise. It's the moment you finally put yourself on the list of people you're willing to care for. This is your invitation to think about that. Think about what you're tolerating. Think about what you're funding. Think about who is benefiting from your kindness and returning you with dismissal. And then, when you're ready, think about what it might feel like to simply walk away. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to this channel. We talk about setting boundaries, taking back your power, and choosing peace over people pleasing. Please let me know in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? Are you team boundaries or team reconciliation? Where are you watching from and what time is it there? Thank you for listening. You're going to be okay. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined in Houston to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.